Clark Kellogg. How are you, Clark?
Good, Rich. How are you?
I'm better for talking to you. I appreciate.
Oh, well, same here. Same here. Glad to join you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So, do you think that this tournament is showing that we're seeing parity in the NCAA?
Without question. I mean, we didn't have any dominant teams going into the tournament, Rich. We've had years in the past where Kentucky in 2012, Carolina in 2009, perhaps Kansas, Memphis in 2008. But by and large, over the last 15 years or so, it has been pretty clear that parity exists. There are usually 8 to 15 teams that you think legitimately have a shot to win it all. And that's really kind of played itself out as we get to the round of 16.
Well, when I had Charles on yesterday, I posited the theory, Clark, that anybody who's in this tournament and any of the 16 teams could win 4 games to cut down the nets. He still thought that the cream of the crop, the so-called cream of the crop, had the leg up. What do you think on that front?
I think so. I think there clearly is a group that you would look at as favorites and strong favorites, but by and large, any of these 16, I agree with you from that standpoint, but you could differentiate just a little bit. The gap isn't as great as it once was years ago between the favorites and the rest of the 16, but I think there is a little bit of a line there.
So give me that line. Who's on the top side of that line for you?
For me, it would be UCLA, Gonzaga, Kentucky, Kansas, and I would even put Purdue in that group and Wisconsin because of Wisconsin's experience and the fact that they have players that have been here and they've been playing well of late. But those teams probably would separate out just a bit. Michigan has a wonderful story unfolding, and prior to this great run they've been on in the tournament, the Big Ten tournament, they were playing excellent basketball before that, Rich, and then you have the incident with the plane, the new lease on life, the perspective and galvanizing force, something like that can be. Then you have a really unique story and some momentum that might be hard to derail for Oregon.
If I gave you a shot to go into the room when they're putting the bracket together, Clark, instead of you being part of the selection show from the television side of things, and I put you in that room to actually put this bracket together, how would you have seeded these teams differently, do you think?
I'm not sure I would have, Rich. I've been in the mock selection process a couple of times as a broadcaster, and they give you a full rehearsal of what it's like. It's intense. It's thorough. There's conversation and debate. There are objective criteria that is used to evaluate teams. Those criteria are subjectively interpreted. Therefore, the 10-person committee will have individual votes and majority rules as these teams are voted on in groups. Not much that I think I would individually do differently in terms of seeding the teams. We always have teams that underperform their seed and overperform their seed. That will never, ever change. The teams are seeded based on the interpretation of the evaluation criteria and that somebody has to be on every seed line. So for me, I don't see I understand the debate, but I don't see the reason to make it much more than a discussion point 24 to 48 hours after the event. And once you get there, you better strap it on and play because whoever's in front of you typically can beat you if you don't perform.
That said, I mean, I'm sure Richard Pitino would say, hey, didn't they see what Middle Tennessee State did to Tom Izzo the year before, or had somehow, some way Wichita State been able to pull it out against Coach Cal? He even said that in the post-game interview as soon as the thing was over. He said that Wichita State was poorly seeded, and Greg Marshall basically said, how many times do we have to do this to get the committee to understand? I mean, so there has to be some sort of recalibration since we have already agreed on parity here.
You've highlighted a couple of exceptions, and it happens to have happened to the same teams. Kentucky was an 8 seed in 2014. Everybody, and remember now, the teams are not seeded based on what happened last year or their program history. They're seeded based on, and you have a valid point with Wichita State this year. Clearly, some of the metrics and indicators pointed to them perhaps being a higher seed, but it didn't happen that way. So I don't know if you tweak for the exception. There are 68 teams seeded, and if you're going to tweak and remake the process because 2 or 3 teams seem to be seeded above or below where they should have been, I don't know what all the screaming and belly aching about is.
Clark Kellogg of CBS and part of the CBS Turner Sports hybrid of March Madness here on the Rich Eisen Show. I loved watching South Carolina. I don't know why they keep jumping out at me. No, honestly, I just love watching them. I think Frank Martin, I really enjoyed his pregame speech to his team, basically saying, look, I was never good enough as a player to be in a position like the one that you're in right now against Duke, and then they went out and beat Duke. I don't know why that's the team that keeps on jumping out at me for the glass slipper here. Clark, what do you think on that subject?
I agree wholeheartedly, and part of the magic and beauty of this madness we experience in March with the NCAA tournament is that there are a lot of different flavors of success out there, and you get a chance to see them up close and personal in ways that maybe you haven't observed them before. I had South Carolina back in early January against Texas A&M. They've continued to defend exactly the way they did against Duke. The offense has come and gone a little bit, but it certainly has come in the first 2 tournament games to the tune of 90 points a game. So, therefore, it's neat to see. And Frank Martin is a fantastic coach, a terrific guy. Sometimes the perception of coaches based on their demeanor on the sideline is far away from who and what they are in their place of work. And Frank is that way, and it's easy, I think, for folks getting a good look at him and his team to be captivated by that, and to be in favor of seeing them continue to perhaps wear the Cinderella slipper compared to who else is part of this field of 16.
Who's the best player left in this tournament, Clark? Individual player.
There are a couple of them. I'm a little biased being a former big guy myself. I love what Biggie Swanigan has done and is doing. Frank Mason has been fantastic. Most likely will be Player of the Year. Lonzo Ball has been brilliant. I think the best two-way freshman in the country, both sides of the court, has been Josh Jackson. His defensive ability, his electrical ability offensively. But if I had to just pick one player that I'd like to kind of ride with, I might go with Biggie Swanigan.
And, of course, I'm just looking at these matchups here. I mean, UCLA, Kentucky, that's the one that just jumps out and hits you right in the face. That's going to be – I can't wait for that one, Clark. What do you think?
It's a rematch of what kicked off the season for us on CBS back in December, Rich. UCLA went into Rupp Arena and won that game in a very entertaining game, and I trust we'll have much the same in this matchup.
Look at you, a company man. Drawn lines between the tournament and the way it all started on CBS.
Well, we try to segue and connect the dots where we can.
Okay. Now, look, and you didn't just leave Michigan off your possibles. I know you mentioned them, secondarily because you're an Ohio State guy. Right, Clark? You didn't do that?
No. It's not personal.
Okay.
I am an Ohio State guy.
I know that.
The team up north is
nice.
worthy of admiration and respect. And
yes.
I have been as captivated by their journey as anybody. And I really enjoy being around Coach Beilein and that staff. And they have been one of the great stories to this point in the tournament. And the journey could very well continue for them.
It certainly could. And what's it like being around Charles in that studio?
It's as good as it gets because, one, he's a genuinely good guy. And he's also extremely funny, just naturally funny. And he's a team player. Him and Kenny and Ernie, just having these 3 weeks with them the last few years for me has been an absolute treat. And your laughing muscles get a workout, Rich. I mean,
bet.
That's part of the deal, man.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, Clark. I enjoy watching you on the tube and chatting with you here. Thanks for calling in.
Likewise, Rich. Take care, man. Take care.
You got it. It's Clark Kellogg at Clark Kellogg CBS on Twitter.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.